This is Small Blocks, Big Dreams, Small Producers Launch Event. This is on behalf of the Central Waterway Land Care and the Karangamite Catchment Management Authority, or CMA. And this is an opportunity to be part of something that is really powerful and beautiful. Something is going on. It's like a movement that's starting. I'm a food writer. I cover lots of things, but there's something going on. It starts with the soil, it goes into the food, it goes into the restaurants, and it goes into people. And it is this web, everyone interlinked, from food producers to government, to small government, to the traditional owners. Something's happening, and it's all about looking after country. Region Ag is not just trendy, it is essential, and it's big, and it is happening. I would say I can smell it. Being a food writer, I can say I can taste it. And it's really, really important. And there's an opportunity today for those people who have small holdings or who have access to land to be able to engage in a journey, to be able to use land, to be able to look after that land and be able to give a return to the family and to be able to produce something for someone else. And there's a whole lot of workshops and part of this program that are going on. And to talk about those workshops, we have from the CMA, we have Karen O'Keefe is about to come up and talk in just a moment. Then we're going to have a talk to a few farmers who have gone through those journeys. But in the middle of that, it's very special. We've got a special speaker today. I think you can see him, he's just there. But I'll introduce him in a minute, Matthew Evans. Please, will you please welcome, from the CMA, will you please welcome Karen O'Keefe. Thank you.
Real good. Yep. Thanks, Richard. It feels a bit weird getting applause and climbing up on the stage. So hi everyone. My name's Karen O'Keefe, and I'm the Regional Agriculture Land Care Facilitator with the Karangamite CMA. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the Small Blocks, Big Dreams program, what it is, where it came from, and then what the opportunity to potentially be involved in that program looks like. So I feel really fortunate to have grown up on a farm in the region, up near Cressy, and I have these fantastic memories of being in the ute with my dad and my brother, and we'd drive around the sheep, and Dad would pull up, and we'd wind the window down, and we'd look out to the wetland, or the swamp, as Dad used to call it, and there'd be all brolgers out there, and they'd be picking up sticks and doing their little dancey thing. And so from a very early age, I developed this love of the landscape, the farming landscape, birds, and the environment. So then I turned into a little bit of a plant nerd and a bird nerd. And then that led to me studying environmental management at uni. And then I worked in natural resource management sort of for the last 20 odd years. And the majority of that being with land care. And the other thing that's also happened is over that period of time, I've had either rented or owned small properties myself, and have a 15-acre property with, we produce some of our own lamb and have the veggie garden, the fruit orchard, and have a couple of horses as well, but don't eat them. They'd be very expensive steaks if that was the case. Andy, we're good to go. So before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet on today and acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging, and thank you very much to Ebony for sharing her story about connection to land. So the Karangamite region. So when we talk about Karangamite, there's three Karangamite things which makes it a bit confusing. One is the catchment and the region, which is what the Catchment Management Authority is based on, which we're looking at here. And then we've obviously there's a local government and there's an electoral boundary as well. So the Karangamite catchment starts at Ballarat and sort of heads down to Geelong, the Bellarine Peninsula, down the Great Ocean Road, Peterborough, up to Mount Elephant, and then back up. So that's the region there. We obviously have a very diverse region, lots of different agricultural enterprises. We've obviously got cropping, grazing, dairy, and then we've got our viticulture, and small producers as well, lots of pork and free-range eggs and those types of things. And we also have an amazingly diverse environmental region. So what do we got? The green frog there, who knows who that is? Yep. Growling grass frog, yeah. So we have lots of different endangered species, native grasslands, and yeah, there's a whole heap going on. Very special region. So small blocks, big dreams, what is it? So small blocks, big dreams is about small properties. So you could have a 5-acre property, you could have a 50-acre, you could have a 100-acre. We haven't actually devised a hard and fast rule, but it basically means that you're not like a 1,000 or 2,000 acre broadacre farmer. It's about skills, knowledge and confidence. It's about learning together, learning from expert presenters as well as learning from other property owners. And it's a partnership with Landcare, different agencies, and we have working groups behind the scenes that have helped us plan this series of workshops, which is Small Blocks, Big Dreams. The Central Otway Landcare Network is leading this small producer program, and there's workshops, property visits, and there's a strong focus on land, water and vegetation management and how you produce your food and fibre. This is a land stewardship project. So how many people here, raise your hand if you've heard the term land stewardship. It's okay if you haven't. Oh, we have. Yep, so I've heard it. What comes to mind for you? What's a word that pops in your head when you hear land stewardship? Who wants to yell out something that they think it means? What is it?
Responsibility.
Responsibility, yes. Good one. Care, yes. We've got another one. Commitment. Yeah, so there's a few different terms and words that can describe land stewardship, but yeah, it's caring for land over a period of time. So what types of activities might this include? If we're caring for our land, what might we do? Weed management, yes, perfect one. I've just been at a weeds workshop this morning, very front of mind. Yep, who's got another one? Yes, protection of the waterway. So you might fence off your waterway and keep stock out of the waterway. So there's 3 different components to Small Blocks, Big Dreams. We're working with bush block lifestyle sort of property owners. That's what we were doing weeds this morning. So we've got a series of workshops happening for those people. We've got a series of workshops running, planning. We're in the planning stage for those who have horses and livestock. And then tonight we're here, the launch event for the small producers. So those who produce, like you might have a bit of an agribusiness running off your small property. So that's specifically what we're here for tonight. So the reason why we're doing this is the Karangamite Catchment Management Authority receives funds from different sources, state and Australian Government. And most of the time our programs in agriculture sort of relate more to bigger broadacre farmers. With our soils programs, we do a lot of nutrient management for dairy farmers, and we've seen an opportunity to actually tailor some workshops for smaller property owners. We've done some social research and we know that we've got increasing numbers of small properties, particularly around south of sort of Ballarat, around Geelong, the Surf Coast, even around this area here. So yeah, we've seen an opportunity there to actually work with some of these people. Yeah. So just some of the stats during our research that we've done, that just gives some figures on what people use their land for. This one was more focusing on those who aren't farming, but yeah, there's different land use happening. Not everyone's just farming across the landscape. And we have lots of interest in working with small landholders. And we know that sometimes intensive land use, when you've got a small property, you can have negative environmental outcomes. We might have weeds, we might have soil erosion and all those types of things. So we see this project as a way to connect land stewardship and food and fibre, and an opportunity to tell that story. If you're practicing good environmental management, putting that into your story, if you're producing clean green food you're managing the land, you're looking after things. That's just a broad area of when we did some mapping where a lot of the small properties, sort of are and the focus area. Yep, go Andy. So what support do you get through this project? So we've got today's session, and then there's a series of 5 workshops that come after today. We can sign up to 20 properties to do this. So you'll get group learning workshops, farm walks, an aerial image of your property. We're supporting people to produce a basic action plan. So you'll go through different themes and you'll go, oh, what are 3 things that are really important to me around soil? Or what are 3 things that are really important to me about weeds? And so we'll help you sort of think that through. And you'll get a property visit from either Landcare or the CMA or a person of your choice. And then there'll be a small amount of incentive money. So these are the topics. Andy's been working behind the scenes to pull these together. So we've got contemporary cultural awareness, landscape thinking, waterways, native vegetation and biodiversity, soils, pastures, pest, plants, animals, biosecurity, wildfire and climate, and property planning. Oh yeah, this is just to say that this program's running over the next couple of years. So if you miss this round, there will be another round of small producer workshops happening next financial year, potentially down around the Ballerine Peninsula Surf Coast, but we haven't locked that in yet.
Time for that round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen O'Keefe, that's really, really interesting, and a lot of that's focused upon land management and about stewardship of the land. And we will be talking in a moment to some people who have undergone that process and who are stewards themselves, who are food producers and are fibre producers here in the region. We're speaking to them in a moment. What is constantly coming up all the time is that word soil. It is a buzzword. We live in a nation of some of the poorest, merest soils on the planet. Soil is running out at a great rate globally because it's not been looked after. No one's taking responsibility. No one's been a steward for the soil, but we have in the room someone who's done a lot of work on this, someone who I think is very important in Australia because not only have they got and understood the basic tenets of soil, but they are so, well, you know, they're one of the best communicators in the country. We have them here today. Mr. Matthew Evans, will you please come up on stage and talk to us about your book and what some of the learnings you have from that? And will you please give him a great big welcome?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for coming today. And I was interested in the definition of what a small block might be. I'm a small farmer in, well, I'm 6'3", but I used to be when I was younger. But we have a small farm in southern Tasmania, and but we call it our big farm because we used to have a 22-acre farm, and then we moved to a 70-acre farm. And so for us, it's our big farm. I don't know what the small farm is, and I'm glad you didn't have a definition, Karen, for them here. But we're a farm, so just to put it in context, we're a farm in southern Tasmania. We are 70 acres, so I usually, you guys are all landholders or probably no landholders, so I don't need to tell you how many hectares there are, which I don't know, because I work in acres. It's about 20-something. And so what we do on that farm is we grow food and cook food and sell food. So we're a mixed farm. So we have, on that 70 acres, we have pigs, dairy cows, beef cattle, goats, a market garden, a heritage orchard, bees, ducks, chooks. I think that's about it. So multiple facets. And the aim with what we do on our farm is to grow as much food within our fence line and then serve it on an on-site restaurant. So my interest in soil, I guess, and the reason I'm here today to talk to you about small blocks is I guess we are a relatively small farm and we're very interested in how we look after that land and what matters. Now, I did write a book, as Richard might have mentioned, on soil, and we couldn't think of what to call it, so we called it Soil. So soil matters. So why does soil matter? Well, soil only matters if you like to sleep indoors, eat, clothe yourself, live, basically. So soil is the magic bit of earth. It's the top bit that lines the earth. I got interested in soil, and I went to my, I've published a few books, and my publisher, I wrote a book on the ethics of eating meat, and she said, we were talking about that book. It had just come out. She said, what do you want to write about next? And I said, soil. And she, what she did? She did this. And I thought, great, she's on board. She's looking for soil. She's with me all the way. And And it turns out, no, she was just avoiding eye contact. And I don't know how many of you are new to growing food. Maybe you're new to to a small block, or you're trying to do something different with the block that you have. But anyone who's interested in soil finds it very hard to understand how other people aren't interested in soil. One journalist from the Canberra Times said to me, she'd read the book and she said, "So you're trying to make soil sexy, Matthew?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I wouldn't put it like that." She said, "Soil's as sexy as colon cancer." Which I thought was a little bit unfair. And I did go away and think, it's unfair, but that's obviously what people think. And I guess there's two things. One is that colon cancer has nothing to recommend it. I haven't had it, but I can't imagine that anyone puts their hand up going, I want to, that's something we need to talk about. And two, soil may not be sexy, but it's important. And so what I'll try to do today is maybe frame a bit of why it's important. So soil only matters if you want to eat, if you want to clothe yourself, want to house yourself. So it's the top bit of earth. Before there was soil, there was no us. Not only no us, there was virtually no life on earth, very little life on earth, certainly no complex life on earth, on land. So soil matters. And so that means farming matters, because farmers deal with soil. Now, when I got interested in writing a book on soil, the reason I got interested in writing a book on soil was for a few reasons. I was growing food, and I'd never grown much food before, and I had a market garden, and we planted broad beans in my market garden, and I had all the same variety of seed went into this garden bed. It's 15 metres long, and we'd prepared the garden bed, we planted the broad beans, and then they grew about this high, and then along the bed they went this high, and then they went down again, and it's like a sine wave, like a curve. And you've got to remember, so the soil that they're growing in it's just one paddock. It used to be an apple orchard. So it's pretty much made of the same stuff. It's got exact same amount of sunlight. They're the same seeds, and it's getting the same rainfall. So there must be something going on that's getting this pattern. So I thought, what's that about? I couldn't really work out what was going on. A second thing that happened, we had a woman come to work with us on soil, and she said soil's alive. So there's living things in soil. And I'd heard this, the Living Soil Association in Britain, that soil's alive. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. Then she took some of our soil, and we looked under a microscope, and we moved the little thing around under the microscope, and eventually we found something living in soil. I thought, there it is, it's alive. Isn't that cool? Then she took some of her soil, put it under the microscope. Oh my God, there's things everywhere. There's single-celled organisms, but there's also the little microscopic worms, these things called nematodes, which I'd never heard of before. So that was about 8 years ago. And then over the years, since we started our market garden, I was growing food in this garden and noticing that the food every year tasted better. Every single year. So there's seasonal variation, so things change from summer to winter in terms of the flavour of the carrots or whatever, but year after year, everything started to taste better. So I had 3 questions about our soil. Why was there no life in it? Why do I get this strange growth? And why is my food tasting better? So I got interested in the thing that's growing my food is it's growing in soil. We're not changing much else. So I wondered what was happening in the bit I couldn't see. So this is soil. Sexy? Nah. This is a rainforest. Anyone who's walked in a rainforest that looks like this or smelled like this tends to get an amazing, overwhelming feeling of joy from walking in it. The smells, the sounds, the feel of the ground underfoot, everything about it gives us visceral pleasure. People love rainforests. People who work with me get arrested trying to protect rainforests. They're a pretty amazing thing, okay? This is the Great Barrier Reef. If anyone's ever dived over the Great Barrier Reef or snorkeled, it's incredible. Again, we get this incredible pleasure and we go, oh my God, this is worth protecting. This is amazing. And this is soil. Someone's made a love heart out of it. Still not sexy. And this is food. And I showed that because I'm a glutton. I'm a chef by trade. That was my first job out of school. So I got interested in soil because I'm interested in food. And if you've got a block of land or any patch of land, it can be as big as this table, you can grow food on it. And food and soil are interconnected. So I guess when I went to my publisher and I said, I want to do this book on soil, she said, find me something interesting about soil. And I said, well, I went away and found pretty basic stuff. 98% of all the calories that humans eat on Earth come from the fact that we have topsoil. 99%, somewhere around there. So pretty much, we don't have topsoil, we can't eat. On our block of land, we think of the Malakadee people. So the Malakadee people are the Huon River people of Lutruwita. So they've been there, by current estimates, 42,000 years. To put that in context, European-style farming, the sort of farming that you would think of that is practiced around here or practiced around us in Tasmania, has been around for about 10,000 years. And so, and in that time, things have changed a lot. So when we walk our land, we think, okay, people have fed themselves from this patch of earth for 42,000 years. That's pretty much forever in human terms. 4 times longer than modern farming has been around. One of the things that when we walk our land is we now think of ourselves as soil farmers. And anyone who grows food, and I don't know if you're already growing food or you want to get into growing food, it isn't rocket science. It really isn't. It's way more complex than that. And why do I say that? Because of soil, because of weather, because of plant biology. So farmers, growers are dealing with some of the most complex ecosystems on Earth. Okay, so you've got things in the soil, you've got things growing in the soil, plants growing in the soil, and you've got weather, which with all the technology we've got today, still isn't very good at predicting more than a few hours or days ahead. And farmers and growers are dealing with that. So, one of the things that I guess fascinated me and I wanted to get across when I'm so interested in soil, I'm wondering why things aren't growing in soil, and I'd heard about this living stuff in soil. So these are some numbers of what actually lives in soil. So just to give you, before we look at that, 1 teaspoon of soil, about the amount of soil that would fit in about the volume of my thumb, the end of my thumb. 1 teaspoon of soil of healthy soil is full of life. There can be up to 10 billion living things in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil. There can be kilometres of fungal hyphae. So if you take a couple of scoops of healthy soil, this is what can be in there. 5,000 insects from up to 500 species, 100,000 protozoa from 500 species. So when I talk about 10 billion living things in a teaspoon of healthy soil, a lot of those are single-celled organisms like bacteria and archaea. But, a couple of handfuls of soil, 5,000 insects. 10,000 nematodes, microscopic worms. I didn't know what a nematode was. Now I know what a nematode is. They represent 80% of all multicellular life on Earth. For every human, there's 60 billion nematodes. 90% of nematodes live in soil. If you linked all the nematodes on Earth, these microscopic worms, if you linked them all together and made a little conga line of nematodes, they would stretch out the door. Well, let's go up. They go through the roof, through the atmosphere, past the moon, past Pluto, outside the solar system. They would get all the way to Alpha Centauri. If you linked all the nematodes on Earth together, they would get all the way to Alpha Centauri and back, according to the CSIRO. That's how many nematodes are on Earth, and 90% of them live in soil. Right, but then we've also got, you can have 500 metres of plant roots in a couple of handfuls of soil, 100 billion bacteria, 100 kilometres of fungal filaments, hyphae, the long threads of fungal hyphae. And you also have algae and archaea. Archaea are like an ancient form of single-celled organism. They live in soil. They live in us a little bit. So soil really is alive. It really is living. A researcher in America has found that there can be a single footfall in an Oregon forest can have each foot is standing on being supported by 120,000 legs. 120,000 legs under a single footfall on 16,000 little creatures. So when we think of soil, that first photo, it looks inert. We don't know what's living there, but we think of it as inert. We think of it as either dead or not interesting. But what's going on in soil is absolutely amazingly interesting. But you need to have really powerful microscopes and really powerful DNA analysis to see what's going on. So when we think of a rainforest and we care about a rainforest, when we think of the barrier reef, when we think of barrier reef, we think we've got to protect it. Okay, to put things in context, we're interested in biodiversity. So how many diverse species there are, right? So the Amazon rainforest, right? Everyone wants to, a lot of people want to protect it. It's considered the lungs of the earth, rightly or wrongly. It's considered a pivotal ecological habitat. It's the most biodiverse ecosystem on the planet, right? Above ground. A single shovelful of soil is more biodiverse than the entire Amazon rainforest from a healthy garden, from healthy soil. So farming, for me, is about that. It's the miracle of miracle work, creating food from dirt, air, sunlight and water. And I guess when I think of soil now, I think of it as, the reason I'm still not sure why my broad beans were growing in this sine wave pattern, but probably it was to do with what things in soil need. So soil, what is soil made of? It's made of dirt. So dirt is essentially crushed up rock. 95% of the weight of dry soil is crushed up rock, sand, silt and clay. So just various grades of crushed up rock. 5% is, these are global averages, 5% is dead stuff, organic matter, you might have heard of that. So it has carbon in it, things that used to be alive, animals or plants that used to be alive. And of the total 100%, about half to 1% is living stuff. Those numbers I showed you before. Those billions of living things in soil. So they're not making up a huge amount of the mass of soil, but just because they're little doesn't make them unimportant. Right. So I want to play a little game. Menindee. Now the reason I'm doing this game is the drought was biting a little bit on the mainland. Oh, you're on the mainland, here in Australia. A couple of years ago, there was a Mars rover. They'd put this, they'd landed on Mars and they'd got some of the best photographs we'd ever seen of Mars. And I'm on this thing called Twitter, which some of the young folk might have heard of, maybe some of the older folk. And I follow some farmers, and these farmers were posting pictures of their farms and saying, "Is this Mars or is this Menindee?" And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Anyway, so Menindee or Mars? Okay, first photo. Yell out what you think. Next one. Next one. That's Mars. This one. Mars. Yeah, it is Mars. This one. Yeah, that's Menindee. Anyway, the reason I do that is because Mars grows nothing. Mars has no topsoil, right? Mars is soilless. Soil evolved on Earth. Soil evolved with green living plants, and that's why there's a little bit of maybe soil there where that little bit of grass is. So it kind of devastated me, and I feel a little bit guilty to point this out. But why would you, as a farmer, be showing your patch of land and comparing it to a place where there is no soil? Like, this really, really, really hit me hard. This was the ABC News. I was in the process of researching about soil, and I'd been following these farmers saying, hey, guess what? Is this Menindee or Mars? And I saw this headline: as the dust storm settles, graziers need to remember the next drought is inevitable. Right? We live in a land of droughts and flooding plains. We've seen it all over the last few years. Inevitable. In that story, they talked about how dust storms, soil storms, had raged for about 8,000 hours in New South Wales in that 12-month period. That's about 330 days of dust storms This is what was topsoil, could be topsoil, that's being moved around. And as soon as you move topsoil, it ceases to be soil. The life within is gone. The carbon blows off. Soil is not designed to be moved around by the wind or by water. One of the things that struck me when I was interested in soil was this incredible ecosystem. The top 20 centimetres of soil, people think of soil as solid, like this. It ain't solid. You just park your car on it, you wash it out from under your nails, and you don't think of it as, it's hard to think of it as a living, breathing superorganism. But the top 20 centimetres of topsoil exchanges all its gases every hour. Like, it's breathing, it's a living, breathing superorganism, and it has structure. And as soon as it gets lifted or washed away, it ceases to become soil. So I got interested in erosion. So where I grew up in Canberra, there's a big drought, 83 drought, end of 82, 3 drought, which some people in the room might be old enough to remember. And when there was... over the drought, I was watching these erosion gullies form. They were 6-7 feet deep and just carving through the sheep grazing country around Canberra. And I was sort of, I was amazed by that, but that was what I grew up with. That's what I expected. I thought that's how landscapes looked. And then a couple of years ago, I was reading this book by a bloke named Darwin, Charles Darwin. Some of you may have heard of him. And he spent the last 20 years of his life writing a book on worms. And he wrote this book on worms because when he was travelling around the world, he would come back to his farm, and where outside his window in this paddock, there used to be rocks, and then the rocks had gone. And he's like, well, where have the rocks gone? Well, it turns out that they were getting covered with earth, with soil. And he wondered, how is that happening? And he thought, is it anything to do with worms? And he spent years watching worms, watching them burrow, watching them bring leaves into holes. And he thought, well, their worms are creating little holes underneath and the rocks are dropping into the soil. Right. Not quite right. They're actually building the soil up over the top of the rocks, but he was pretty close. Australia and most of the world, that's not happening anymore. So topsoil originated like 400 million years ago, 600 million years ago, it depends on how you want to measure it, but starting about 600 million years ago, we started to get topsoil. And nature would, topsoil's always being lost, a little bit gets washed away or can be blown away, but depending on if it's very dry or not. But it's also being made, and typically the earth has made more soil than it's lost, or at least the same amount. Not so anymore. These are some sheep yards. So they moved 650 tonnes of topsoil out of these sheep yards that have been blown in. So 650 tonnes is quite a lot. You sort of get a bit of a visual with the sheep pen. But Australia loses 2.9 billion tonnes of topsoil every year on average. So some years, I'd say the last few months with all the floods, we've lost quite a bit. When we had all those 8,000 hours of dust storms, soil storms, we lost quite a bit. So it averages over the years. This is how much, according to the Australian Government, the State of the Environment report, which this is 5 years old because the new one is sitting on the Environment Minister's desk and they're not releasing it till after the election. Maybe, probably not for erosion reasons, but probably for other reasons, biodiversity reasons, possibly. That's how much of topsoil we lose every year. So the sheep pens, like I find it really hard to get my head around these numbers, like 60 billion nematodes per human being, 10 billion living things in a teaspoon of healthy soil. I go, well, there's more things in a teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on the planet. That helps me sort of frame it. But I still find these numbers too big. So what I did is, there's some really good information, I think it was Rio Tinto, about a new train they put in. This is, I think, iron ore. So if you took all of the 2.9 billion tonnes of topsoil that Australia loses every single year, that train would stretch around the globe 15 times. That's what we're dealing with. So we're losing topsoil globally 30 to 40 times faster than nature makes it. It used to be the same amount made as we lost. Globally, we lose it 30 to 40 times faster than nature make it. If you plough your soil, you lose it 100 times faster than nature can make it. We've lost so much topsoil because we invented the tractor and had fossil fuels and the plough. They're one of the main culprits, but they're not the only culprit. Another is overgrazing. So Australia is on track to abandon 10 million hectares of land in the next 500 years. So let's frame it a different way. One of the ways I like to think of it, so the Malakadee people, right, feeding themselves 42,000 years from our patch of land, right? Didn't feed as many people as we do now, but didn't lose that much topsoil. Because we know that Australia has lost half its topsoil since white people arrived, since Europeans colonised Australia. Half. This is the bit that does all the growing. This is the only bit that does the growing. This is the bit that we are utterly reliant on. We've lost half. And we're going to lose the next half of our topsoil in the next 30 or 40 years. You can measure it in decades. Some parts of Australia, the more arid parts, it takes 1,000 years to make 1 centimetre of topsoil. You know, if you lose half of that in the next 40 years, you're kind of screwed. Like you've kind of ruined it. So when I talk to you about your small blocks and your farms and your land management, it doesn't matter whether you're growing food or you know, whatever, if you don't put topsoil at the top of your mind, you maybe, you know, you're missing the point. My farm, I own the farm. Well, I'm going to own it for a speck of time. Like, you know, in geological terms, my management of that is for a moment in time. And essentially, my farm and yours is a national asset. The government may not own it, the public may not own it, but it's a national asset. And I think we all have a responsibility to look after that national asset, not just for my children, but for all the children yet to come. Another way of framing that amount of topsoil, right? This is global averages, and it does vary a bit. There is a lower estimate than this, but it's not that much lower. On average, for every breakfast, for every lunch, for every dinner that every human on Earth eats, we lose 9 kilograms of topsoil. You know, staggering. This is utterly staggering. This is the only planet we've got. So this is the choice. Menindee or Mars. We're making Mars out of the Earth. So since the agricultural revolution, about 10,000 years ago, so that farming system that was developed in the Middle East, some of you might have heard of the Fertile Crescent, apparently not fertile any longer, pretty much desert. Okay, that's happened over and over and over again. Typically people just like you and me, probably well-meaning, not realising what they're doing, got hold of a piece of land, buggered it up and moved on. 40% of the agricultural land we used to have is abandoned. It is no longer fit for purpose. And we've only got one Earth. So a lot of people say, I was at a thing recently and someone said, they were sitting next to me and said, you're not a proper farmer. And I thought, yeah, well, you know, probably fair enough. But are they? Okay, so what is a proper farmer? I don't know. This person had a big farm, a broadacre farm, and they're feeding the world, right? Well, they're not, actually. They're feeding someone. A full 70% of the world's food is grown by smallholders, pieces of land less than 5 acres. Less than 5 acres. Most of that is grown by women. Something like 60 to 70% of that food that comes from those small farms is grown by female farmers, women farmers. So this idea of men as the farmers is a myth. 1 billion people around the tropics feed themselves from domestic gardens. Up to 100 species of plants growing in domestic gardens. Now, southern Tasmania, southern Victoria, it's not the tropics, right? It's a little bit harder in some seasons to grow food in our climate, but this is what's possible. 1 in 8 people is currently fed from a domestic garden around the tropics. Okay? What is possible on small patches of land is mind-blowing. One of the things that's happened in the last 200 years, and we've lost most of our agricultural land, and we've lost most of the carbon from soil. So carbon, the building block of life that was stored in soil, we've lost half of that in Australian soils in 200 years. A lot of that's been lost because we have fossil fuels. So we can burn fossil fuels to run our tractors, to dig land or to impoverish land. So it's estimated that it takes 10 calories of fossil fuels to get a calorie of food. So everything you eat today, probably everything you wear today, has been subsidised by fossil fuels. And we know that has a has a limited lifespan. The fossil fuels that we can dig up and get away with. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. So this is me. We'd had a wet winter. That's 40 mils of rain the night before. That's a pig shelter. And that was our old farm, the 22 acres. And that area now, we sold that farm a few years ago so we could build a house on our other property. That is now a dam. Not built by my pigs, built by fossil fuels. I'm not proud of this, but I want to show you this because this is me doing what humans have done since we invented farming. Buggering up a piece of land, selling it and moving on. Okay? That's what, 7 years ago, 8 years ago? Maybe a bit longer. I only owned that place for about 6 years. And I took what wasn't terrible, wasn't great, and made it worse. This is our current farm. So the foreground on the left, that's 5 years after we bought that farm. There's a bit of bare earth, there's not much grass. We had already started rotational grazing, and if you're into grazing and livestock, you might have heard of that, where you move cows every 12 hours, 24 hours, every 2 days, something like that. The blue line is our fence line. So just up above that is the neighbour's place. And you can see my photos are from slightly different angles. So we'd had the place for 5 years. We'd had people visiting and teaching us how to move cows, how to check for leaf litter on the soil, but it still doesn't look all that flash. I can see bare earth beyond the hay shed, the shed with the solar panels. Oh, thank you. Beyond the solar panels, I can see bare earth up there where my pigs have been. I can see almost bare earth in the foreground and where my cows are. 5 years later, slightly different angle, but you can still see the shed, and you can see I've got no bare earth, and we're managing it better. Now, I'm no genius. I just want to show you, I guess, that our journey that we've been through, and so it can maybe help you inform your decisions. Next one, thanks. And this is a photo I took yesterday. Oh, no, it was too raining. It must be 2 days ago. So again, slightly different angle. We've changed the management again. We've the one on the left. Oh, by the way, the previous slide. If you just go back to the previous slide, can you do that? So that's a little bit of a false photo in some ways. A very dry year on the left, April 2016, and a wetter summer on the right. Okay, next slide. April 2022, we just had the hottest by 2.5 degrees summer and the driest summer on record. And if you have a look, I've got some residual green, I've got good grass growth, I've got no bare earth. But importantly, if you have a look at my neighbour's paddocks, I don't know if you can see where the blue line would have been on the other one. So there's this, sort of that bald looking bit just before the trees. You can see they've got no green, no good growth. And so our management, slow as it is finally, you can actually finally see it, how we've changed the way we've managed the land. This is our garden. So on the left, just before we put pigs in when we first bought the land, on the right, what it looked like 10 years later. And I like these photos because you can sort of see how the change in landscape. This is looking back towards that gate. So these are the rows of plants that we've got in the garden up towards our house. I just like that. I like the fractals on the Romanesco. Broccoli. Yeah. These we're pretty proud of. So one hectare, of land can have 90,000 kilometres of worm tunnels. 1 hectare, 100 metres by 100 metres, 90,000 kilometres of worm tunnels. Amazing. There's some really good research out of New Zealand that shows that one of the best ways to get water infiltration into ground is by having super high worm numbers. And when we build urban landscapes or we impoverish rural landscapes, water can't escape. And we've seen a lot of that over the last little while. We find it on our place now that water, it's still not a long way from perfect, but water gets in better. Next. This is, again, the garden. Next. These are our pig paddocks from 2012. So that's just after we moved our pigs over there. So got rid of the bloody Berkshire. Long gone. And some Wessex saddleback pigs. And then slightly different angle, but pretty much from the same gate on the right. So a lot of bare earth on the left, a tiny bit of bare earth on the right. And this is what it's like now. So this was last year. I didn't manage to get a photo, but it hasn't changed much. So what we've done there is all these trees have grown. Our pigs are storing, because we're letting this orchard, there's an old abandoned apple orchard, because we let the woody trees come back, we are now storing 77 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent for every kilo of pig that we produce. So we're carbon negative. The whole farm is about somewhere between 100 and 150 tonnes of carbon dioxide is stored on farm every year, more than we release. This is, it's hard to see, but I've actually got a multi-species cover crop in there. So I've planted, I think it was 9 different species in the middle of our paddocks because we found the soil was getting a little, this bit is dry in winter and we overused it a little bit. So we know, I'm a complete Gumby when it comes to farming, but I think we've improved the soil. If you have a look at the next photo, this is my cows grazing through that 6 months later. So their tick beans look like a broad bean. They're very similar varieties of bean. So what is a proper farm? Well, some of those photos, just to put things in context, about 40% of our farm is dedicated to wildlife and regrowth forests or old forests. Not very old, most of it, but some of it's old. We've increased the carbon, the magic bit in our garden. We've doubled that in 10 years or in 5 years. And we've increased the carbon in our pasture. Those pictures of the paddocks, we've increased the carbon in our pastures roughly 20% in the last 5 years. And we don't really know what we're doing. I'm not, some kind of genius here, but it's the way we manage it. On our 70 acres, we grow enough food for 5,000 feast meals a year. So that's really big meals where people come for lunch and don't usually need to go have a dinner. We employ the equivalent of 10 full-time staff. So what is a proper farm? I think for me, that's one of those questions that you have to answer yourself if you want to grow food, if you want to look after land. Don't be fooled into thinking that only people with big spray rigs and professional agronomists and 10,000 hectares are proper farms. Everything from the smallest patch of land to the biggest is of value. So I just want to leave you with that. When we manage land as land stewards, what matters is our actions. We can impoverish land as many of our ancestors have done and want to do. They didn't do it on purpose. Sometimes maybe they did, but most of the time they didn't know. They just made a bunch of mistakes. We now know better. We know how to build soil, and you're going to learn some of that through the workshops you're going to be doing. But we also know how to ruin soil. And as land managers, no matter how small your block, it's incumbent on you to know, to make that decision. Are you going to make Mars or are you going to build Earth? Thank you.
Please thank Matthew Evans.